My name's Jeff Toobin. This is Tim Wu at Columbia Law School. Tim's work is sort of at the intersection of law and technology and how legal rules push technology into one direction or another. And I'd like to start with a very homey example. Everybody in this room, I suspect, has both a cell phone and a computer in their lives. And I think, as we all know, in the next few years, they will start to compete more and more. There will be video and telephony offered by both, music. But the legal rules and the sort of structure of the telephone business is very different from the computer business. So talk a little bit about that.
This is, the theme of this conference is 2012, and the question is what are going to be the sort of intellectual property disputes that dominate the next 5 years. And one of the things I think will be this tale of two platforms, this conflict between the laws and culture that has grown up surrounding the cell phone, which is they're the sort of current descendants of the original Bell Company from the 19th century. A very closed garden, a very controlled approach to content and so on and so forth. And the computer, which has grown up from the sort of the spirit of the 1970s and the West Coast in California, legally has been an almost completely unregulated medium. You know, the laws on top of them affect the computers, but there's never been there's no federal computer commission. You know, there's a Federal Communications Commission, but there's no particular set of rules that are designed around the computer. And right now, when these two platforms start doing all the same things, the question is, what are going to be the rules that govern? And the other question is whether the computer, with its openness, with its sort of uncontrollability, the Internet with its very difficulty of controlling the conduct over the Internet, is going to be the dominant way of the future, or whether it will be the more closed and controlled and also profitable for the companies involved model of the cellular phone platform. And that's what I think we're going to see.
Well, talk a little bit about what you mean by a closed system. Right. As I do, I have a Verizon phone, and that phone only works on the Verizon network, right? So what do you mean by a closed system, and what would an open phone system look like that's different from the one we have now?
So let's make that. I think this is something that you don't necessarily pay a lot of attention to, but you know, on your telephone, or even your relatively sophisticated telephones, there's a lot of control by a company like Verizon over what applications or work on that telephone. Unlike, you know, you buy your computer and you sort of install whatever you want. If you're talented, you can program and do whatever you want. This has been the design of the computer from the early days. It's a very unusual machine, the computer, in the sense it's very open to whatever you want to make it into. But telephones tend to come with what the carrier wants you to have, and so it's much more difficult, even as something as simple as putting your own ringtone. You know, if you love Depeche Mode or something, and putting your own ringtone is relatively challenging, while computers are built to be a lot more easily open and customizable. So they're just different from the outset. And I hope that makes it clear.
One product that is sort of at the intersection of these two worlds is the Apple iPhone.
Right. And
talk about how we'll talk about how the Apple II, the old computer, the sort of one of the first PCs, was the model of an open system.
Right.
But I think you feel that the iPhone is a very different kind of product.
Yeah, that's right. So, you know, the Apple iPhone is a remarkable product in a lot of ways, and one of the most remarkable things is the fact, I think, that Apple began this product with an alliance with AT&T. I mean, you can't think of two companies sort of ideologically more different in the tech world at the beginning. You know, Apple is born with these sort of Steve Wozniak, who's this kind of 70s free thinker, basically a hippie. And, you know, AT&T, and especially in the 1970s, is this traditional company from the 19th century, very successful, very powerful, but also very controlling over how its technologies are controlled. I mean, if you want to look at the revolutionary products, maybe of the entire century, you can point to a lot of them, but the Apple II computer was really an unusual device. It was the most power at that time put in the hands of an individual in technology that had ever been done up to that point. For most of the century, technology was always understood as something that is operated, controlled, and understood by experts, who then allow users to deal with it in a very simplified way. So the mainframe computer is a centralized computer, guys with white coats switching off the tapes and making everything work. And then at their desktop you just have a simple dumb terminal that basically doesn't do very much. The telephone is an incredibly centralized network. The telephone network, all of the intelligence is in the middle. And the experts figure out how everything's going to work, and then you pick up your phone and it works, right? So that's the model of central intelligence, of a big brain in the center taking care of everything. The Apple II is the opposite of that idea because the brain is at the edge of the network. The brain is in the user's hand. And similarly, when the Internet came along, it was the opposite of the telephone networks. The functionality of the Internet is in the user's hands. The people at the edges decide what the Internet's going to be like. If you notice the Internet, a company like Yahoo or Google, these are companies at the edge of the network, YouTube or even Wikipedia. These aren't the phone company deciding what it's going to be like. These are end companies. We say in design, the intelligence is distributed as opposed to centralized. So again, to go back to the original question, what is going to win in the future? Is it going to be the centralized intelligence systems like the mainframe, like the centralized computer, like basically the way the cell phone network is designed, where the user basically has a very simple device, very easy to use, that works well and reliably, but can't be really modified that much to do what you want with and isn't that intelligent? Or is it this model where you're trusted with all of the intelligence, you do what you want with it, you could screw it up, there's a lot of viruses, problems, but there's this possibility of this computer becoming something that you can use for purposes beyond which it was originally designed. That is, I think, the dominant. It's been the battle between the Internet and the phone system in the 1970s, and in this next 5 years will be the battle we see over platforms.
And your concern about the iPhone, just to go back to that, is that it's a wonderful piece of technology, right, but you as a user, if you choose to get one, are a prisoner of AT&T.
Right, that's right. So the iPhone is right in the middle here, in the sense that the way the iPhone was designed, it is not open. It is much more like a telephone than like a computer, and I said this is surprising considering the fact the Apple II was the original computer. So you had, it's a little heart of darkness in the sense that you have the hero of the open computer revolution, Apple, creating a closed platform with AT&T, which is its sort of the leader of the opposite intellectual movement. The question really is whether Apple is doing this because it has decided that closed systems really work better. And there's a long tension inside that company, really between Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, over what is better, open or closed designs, whether they've converted in some way, or whether this is sort of a step in, like in the, talk about copyright, the music world, where Apple starts iTunes kind of a little bit as a Trojan horse, in the sense that originally it seems like it's something that's supposed to help the record labels, and now the record labels are starting to wonder, well, is this really where we wanted to go? So Apple has a history of kind of getting a foot in the door and then using that to wrench things back to a more open kind of system.
What can the government or the courts do about, or can they do anything, or should they do anything about sort of the open source world versus the closed source world? What rules are going to come up in the next few years that will determine which way technology evolves?
Right. Well, they are sort of by default absolutely involved in this evolution. First of all, the intellectual property laws, copyright and patent most obviously, are central to deciding the fate of these different companies. If you look at right now, we have the future of telephony, voice, talking, being determined by patent courts in the Eastern District of Virginia. And so, the patent system and the copyright system play a major role in deciding who are the winners and losers in these technological battles between incumbent carriers and existing companies and new challenger companies. So that's one set of rules. And the other set of rules, which are absolutely central to this, are the telecommunications laws, which have gradually, over the last 5 years, there's been an absolute, or 10 years, revolution in telecommunications law in a deregulatory direction, as in getting rid of the basic principles of common carriage. Now, this goes beyond this is more complicated. But basically, those two laws, the telecommunications laws and the copyright and patent laws, are setting the stage for market entry in these markets. They are deciding who gets to enter the market, how they do when they enter the market. And, you know, there's a lot of rhetoric about inventorship and authorship, which is important. But to a large extent, these are also tools for trying to control who wins and loses and who gets to enter the market.
And speaking of how legal rules change technology, what's going to happen in February 2009?
Sure. So this is an interesting thing that not a lot of people know about. February 2009, if you own a television set, which is a normal television set analog, and you don't have a cable or satellite, it'll just go blank on that day, or more precisely, snowy. You know, you turn it on and it'll go snowy. And the reason is the government has...
I mean, that's an amazing fact.
Yeah,
everybody in the United States who doesn't have cable will lose their television service on February 2009.
Yeah, February 17th, I think the midnight, February 17th, 2009, is the day the TVs go blank in the United States if you don't have cable or satellite service.
And why is that?
The reason that is the government has at last decided to take the spectrum, that is the airwaves that now carry television, broadcast television, free over-the-air television, and turn them off.
And why did the government decide to do that?
Well, it's part of a very long discussion, but the basic argument has been that way of using the airwaves is incredibly inefficient, right? That it could be used for a better purpose. Now, what they're doing is they're going to retransmit your favorite TV shows. I mean, it is true. How many people here have watched UHF in the last decade?
How many people remember what UHF is? Let's start by that. UHF are the channels above 13.
Yes.
Is that 13 to whatever? I mean, and that it's basically disappeared from
right.
common use.
Right.
But anyway,
if you're in the industry in the 1960s, the FCC was sure that UHF was the future. So there was a lot of time and energy. UHF was like, if you read the old stuff from the 60s, UHF coming soon. UHF, it's it. UHF. Cable was thought as a bad idea.
And the stations under 13 were VHF.
VHF,
right,
that's
okay.
right. Very high frequency, ultra high frequency, if you're interested. But so the basic reason the government is turning all these things off, or ordering the companies that are broadcasters to stop transmitting, revoking the licenses for those particular areas, is just this idea of, no, this is a waste of this very precious resource, the airwaves. And instead, the idea is they can compress them and send them in digital format. So they'll still be there. You'll just need a special television set that's capable of receiving digital broadcast, which I imagine nobody has. But
I mean, that's not the same as having an HD TV. A digital TV is something else.
A digital TV is something else, although many digital TVs are also capable of receiving. They have the new digital receiver technology.
So
right.
The government has said, and this is true, that the government has said they may actually give people adapters
right.
to start receiving television. I mean,
right.
on the February day,
right.
the law that is at least technically on the books
right.
says that they will be able that the government will give you an adapter
right.
to translate the new transmission of TV into a
yes,
usable signal.
Right. Several billion-dollar program to convert your television, if it's an old-fashioned analog television, into one capable of receiving digital signals for Y2K of the telecom world, which is February 17th, 2009.
Now, perhaps call me unduly cynical, but the idea of the government giving everyone in the United States a television adapter that's somehow going to work on February 17th, 2009 seems like beyond improbable and just the fiasco to end all fiascos.
Well, every single step of this process has been a fiasco.
Oh.
So this wouldn't be, this wouldn't be nothing new. The original, the original plan was actually this was supposed to happen a lot earlier, because this is, I mean, again, there's like a lot of the airwaves. So, and there's a couple of ridiculous aspects which I can go into, but this was first of all supposed to happen a lot earlier. It's just that they set up a deadline, so it never kind of ended. Another thing is, in the meantime, as we speak right now, the whole idea was supposed to save spectrum, right? Right now, as we look around this room, the airwaves are full of both the digital and the analog signals, and they've been doing that for about the last 5 years or so. So we have 10 years of transition time where both analog and digital signals are both being sent. And the idea is Americans need 10 years to get used to this thing. But I don't think anyone even knows about it. So what's the use of having this 10 years of them both going on? It seems completely absurd. And the other thing is the stations never even had to pay for the spectrum that they got. The value of the spectrum is somewhere in the neighborhood, now over $100 billion, and it was just handed over.
If you owned an analog station, you essentially got the digital equivalent for free.
That's right.
And there was some controversy about this.
That's
when this, I think John McCain was actually upset
John McCain,
about this.
True.
But it did not. I mean, it didn't lead to anything. So this was a major giveaway.
Right.
Let's talk in our remaining minutes about copyright law.
Oh, sure.
You said that we've been talking about spectrum as a barrier to entry. I mean, some people have access to the spectrum, some people don't. That's a barrier to entry. But copyright is also a barrier to entry.
It can serve as a barrier to entry, that's for sure. I mean, copyright has become so controversial that teaching it in law school is like teaching abortion or something. I mean, it is people come into your class and like go crazy.
I mean, define the terms of the debate that people are so exercised about. I think people understand pro-choice and pro-life a little bit.
Right. Well, I mean, copyright, copyright from one viewpoint is the sort of holy grail of authorship. It's the thing that protects legitimate industries from theft of their products and so on and so forth. And to another set of views, particularly technologists, so that's sort of more of an East Coast view, let's just put it, large media companies, Viacom. This is an East-West kind of Civil War thing. It's also kind of a Northern California, Southern California, because the people in the South make the content, Southern California. The people in the North make the stuff that lets you steal it, so or lets you take it. All right. So let's. No, I'm actually on I'm on some sides of this debate. So the. Right. So there's a huge debate. Some people think that copyright is just absolutely everything. And then the other view, which I think is also very powerful, this law really makes no sense in the 21st century. Copying is something we do every day. Copyright is the single most, maybe with the exception of office supplies stealing, violated law in the United States. It is almost impossible to go through an average day without violating copyright law. I mean, you wake up and someone's emailed you a story from, let's say, the New Yorker without permission. Guess what? You've just violated copyright law. Friends send you over their pictures or, you download stuff. You just are always involved in copyright violations. And so people say, this whole idea of banning copying is completely, it's like banning breathing. Everything we do now is copying. And so you have a law that says every time you copy something, you're getting in trouble with the law. That's insane. A. B, this law is being used cynically just by existing industries who are doomed anyway to try and kind of protect their position in the market. Like CD distribution probably is not, if you're looking for a new business to get into, selling records probably not the best one, right? But nonetheless, although that seems obvious to everybody, the distributors of content have been, kind of killing all the new means. They were just forced slowly through Grokster, through Napster, through all this stuff, slowly forced into iTunes after, putting up resistance for 10 years. And our idea is that, as you said in your question, that copyright is simply being used as a way to kill new technologies and kill new means of distribution. And it's just like, from the 18th century. So this is almost a religious kind of dispute, and will certainly be a characteristic of the next 5 years.
And I mean, just in the immediate past, we have Google buying YouTube for $1.6 billion.
Right.
Almost simultaneously, by Google paying all that money for YouTube, you have Viacom, you have Comedy Central, you have NBC saying, we're taking all our content off. Right. So because we want to be able to control how it's distributed, we want to either sell advertising around it or sell it itself. Right. So did Google make a mistake? Is it just going to be sort of the cat playing the piano? Is that all that's left?
The cat playing the piano. First of all, the cat playing the piano can be pretty good. That's one of the things.
I know it's very popular.
I saw one with a dog, a dog with a lightsaber, which was like Star Wars, like Lucasfilm style special effects with a dog, and it was pretty amazing. But anyway,
I don't think Google really the dog with the lifesaver is enough for Google. Right.
Well, let me say two things. Let me give you two answers. First of all, and I think that something that people underestimate in this market in general is that it's not that easy to write really good software of any kind, in particular of this video kind of software. I mean, people have said, and a lot of analysts will just say, oh, anyone can do YouTube. What's the big deal? They wasted billions of dollars. Google tried to do this themselves, and Google, they're pretty good, but Google Video was never just quite as good as YouTube. I don't know what it is, a special sauce or something. Occasionally I try to use the Comedy Central site. It sucks.
You know what? I have the same experience because I used to watch The Daily Show on YouTube,
right.
And I mean I'm a victim of this
right.
copyright problem. And I've gone to the Comedy
sure
Central website.
That?
It's terrible.
Right.
It's very hard. It's very clunky and hard to use. And,
right.
And so I agree.
Yeah.
Just wanted to add.
I mean, computers are not different than anything else. If someone's really good at making a particular widget, like a company is really good at making, I guess, bows and arrows or something, it's not that easy to copy them and do exactly the same thing. We've seen this over and over. I mean, people said, what the hell's Google all about? Because anyone can do a search engine, right? But Google became a verb because it's so damn easy to use and good to use. And YouTube, it has, whether it has content or not, does seem to have a kind of a real ease of usage, which hasn't been replicated as easily as people thought. Right? You kind of click on it, it goes pretty well. They just seem to have a lot of things.
But putting that
right.
issue aside,
right.
I mean, the fact that it is a better piece of software,
right.
what is the future of YouTube when the content
right.
producers, the NBCs, the Viacoms, say, you can't have our content
right.
without paying
right.
us or giving us a piece of the action
right.
in some
right.
way?
Right. So that was part two of my answer, which I am now getting to. First of all, I want to stress one thing, is that not everybody has demanded their content be taken down.
Is that right?
Yes. And I think there is a real tension or a challenge for the people in these companies. I'm going to go back to Google's challenge in a second. But first of all, there's a major question for the people who are in these networks, NBC and so forth, which is they have this dilemma. The legal departments of these companies look at what's going on, and they said, there's 1 million downloads of Saturday Night Live's, what's that funny Narnia skit? There's been 1 million downloads. Our stuff has been stolen 1 million times. That's legal, right? The marketing departments look at that, and they say, 1 million people are watching Saturday Night Live? There hasn't been like 10,000 people watching that for, when's the last time, Eddie Murphy level excitement. So there's this sort of, so inside the companies, there's a real internal battle over what to do about YouTube. And the result has not been consistently take it down. NBC, you mentioned NBC. Their response is actually a lot more complicated. They have started their own site called NBC Replay, I think it's called, which is pretty good, although, again, the technology is not as good as, it's kind of a little slower than YouTube. But they also give their best clips to YouTube. If they find a clip that people seem to like, they hand it over. They're like, people want to watch it. And then, maybe this will be good for us. So there's a real internal battle over that. And YouTube's success depends in some extent on, first of all, enough companies thinking that YouTube is important enough that they have to stick with it. That it's either YouTube or the highway, right? In other words, if that makes any sense, YouTube, that it either like YouTube is where people's are, is where the eyeballs are, and, despite trying to distract them, that it is now channel number 1 or something, and you have to be there or forget it. So if that happens, then YouTube wins. And B, if it can create the right deals where it hands over, if it becomes the platform, the one, platform that, or TV platform that rules the rest, that people have to, that it shares some of that revenue with people in the right way, then YouTube wins. But if people successfully create their own YouTubes and people just think, oh yeah, what was that? That was so 2000s, then YouTube loses.
But
yeah.
the issue remains that the tension you're describing. I mean, I wrote about this in the New Yorker about Google Books.
Right.
That people want the exposure of being in bed with Google, so to speak.
Right.
But the question is, when are they going to? How do they get any revenue? I mean, the marketing department thinks
right.
it's great that 1 million people watched the Narnia
right.
skit, but what, in terms of dollars, did NBC get out of it?
Right. Well, that is the kind of. I think we look at the future. 2 words in intellectual property are really important: control versus exposure. There's always this balance of control versus exposure. And control also stands in for making money off of content. The old model, and also going back to our opening thing, complete control, the sort of cell phone model or the telephone model, complete monetization. But openness and exposure, people know more about your product. The idea that companies are looking for, to get back to the question, is somehow having enough openness but being able to cash in at some magic moment. And the idea, again, for a company like NBC, let's say, is that they'll make a deal with YouTube where they agree to silence their copyright lawyers for a while, kind of muzzle their copyright lawyers, and then give us, half the money that you get in advertising. I mean, the advertising money is going to be there. Remember, broadcast TV, which is being turned off, is also free. Right? I mean, there's no money being paid. You turn on your TV, and there it is, at least for the next couple of years. And, somehow someone figured out how to make money out of that. And the question is, how exactly are people going to make money out of this? And whether it's YouTube or whether it's their own site, somehow people are going to figure out how to make money out of it. Although, in the meantime, there may be a lot of suffering. But somehow, some way, people are going to figure out how to monetize eyeballs.
And I think that will have to be the last word. And thank you, Tim, and thank you all for listening.